Good morning. As we wrap up a week, we're also wrapping up our missions month. And this January, we spent a lot of our time talking about missions. We're on our 70 days of prayer and fasting. And by the way, Sunday night, I'll talk a little bit about fasting. Some people have asked me some questions about it, and I'll talk about it. But in case you're not able to be there or listen, I just say fasting is when you deny yourself um, food primarily, but whatever, deny yourself that you might seek God. That's the summary. To deny the physical, seeking the spiritual. And it could be sleep, it could be any other things. We'll talk a little bit about it at church, but we've been encouraging people to spend some time fasting. We've got a calendar at the altar at church where people can put their initials, their name in, and pick a day. We want every day somebody fasting during that. I never compel anybody. Nobody checks or asks, but you can look down and say, well, nobody, or there's only a few people fasting on this day. I'll fast that day. And the staff here in our office, we have a calendar also, because our staff, we want to fill a calendar for 70 days with staff members fasting. And so we got two calendars. But this month we've talked a lot, excuse me, about missions. And I want to just take a moment here. This is the official last day, weekday, where I'll have a morning moment. We got the weekend, of course, but we'll be into February. So we're going to have our 70 days of prayer and fasting going until the first week in March. But missions also is a January emphasis. And we'll be in Luke chapter 16, Luke 16 in a minute. But I just want to encourage you this weekend. We have a special guest. Benjamin George is going to be with us. Now, Benjamin, 20 years ago, I'm guessing 20, about that, Brian George and his wife visited us, and they were on their way to Argentina to work with missionary Larry Owens, who I was in school with. So Larry Owens, almost maybe 35 years ago, went down to Buenos Aires, and he started working there. And just to say, he stayed there. He buried his wife. He lost his wife to cancer, raised his three boys, and two of the boys are back working with him in the ministry there. And then about 15 to 20 years ago, Brian George, who grew up in Argentina, his parents being missionaries, he graduated from Bible college, got married, and he went to work with Larry Owens. And Bible college, church planning, training pastors to go start other churches. And so now, 20 whatever years later, Benjamin George, Brian George's son, is going to be with us. He was speaking at a missions conference in Southern California, and he called me up. I said, well, certainly come. And he missed our missions conference, but I said, just come. So he'll be with us this weekend, and you'll get to see a video and hear a little bit about the ministry down there in the Tucumán, I think is the name of the town. I think Argentina, or I think Buenos Aires, but they're out in rural areas in different cities. But I just want us to think about missions. Now, this weekend, which is the end of the month, missions month, we have Benjamin George. Next weekend, we stretched missions one more week because I found Johnny Esposito was available, and he has been overseeing a pretty amazing ministry throughout Southeast Asia. And I'll let him next Sunday, the first weekend in February, I'll let him decide how much he wants to say, because some of his work may be underground. I don't know exactly what he wants said or not said, but there's many great missionaries in the area of Southeast Asia, and he's kind of the overseer, helping them with their needs, and the multiple teams there. And of course, he's out of Pacific Baptist in Long Beach, and what a miracle ministry that is. Joe Esposito, along with Brother Steve Myers and others, they started that church 35 years ago, about 35 years ago, just a few years after us, and have built the most amazing church. And one of the few places in America where a man started a church and has built it up to any size at all, and has been sending out lots of young people to serve God. And we have, for whatever reason, been uniquely blessed in that area as well. We've always been broke. Some churches are really blessed financially. Some are really blessed with lots of converts baptized or whatever. Every church, some big educational ministries like colleges and all. And our church, for whatever reason, has been blessed and young people going on to serve God, and young people staying in church and living for God. And we've been so blessed. But Joe Esposito started the church there. His brother Johnny was influential for many years in and out. But in his 50s, Johnny Esposito saw the need. They had, I think, over 30 of their own young people in Southeast Asia. And so he went to help work with those young people and keep things in order. So next Sunday, the first weekend in February, we're going to have Joe Esposito in several different services. And so you're going to want to, I'd love for you to come and be able to be a part of that. If you're watching online, of course, things will be there'll be a live stream. And as long as the weather's not too bad, I'll have my parking lot Sunday school this week. Next week, I'm going to have, I may still have it. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, I hope you'll keep your heart with missions. I want to read you. Here's our missions book this year. And it's got our pictures of our missionaries, and just a name and a country. And you can see, and then in the back it lists several different ways you can find the missionaries. But many of these great missionaries, Lane Jones in the Philippines, Samar, and it's a very difficult area, hard to get to. And the Jones are just a little bit older than me, and they've been there their whole ministry. I think it was Navy. He was a Navy young man, married his wife, Anelia, came to America, got saved, surrendered to preach, went back to her home area. And what a gracious lady she is. But they're on the 40-year mark of ministry or somewhere around there. And so many of our missionaries, thank God for some young missionaries that are coming in to fill in, because some of us are getting old. Dan and Terry Gardner have been in Japan longer than we've been in Wildomar. And so there again, we're looking at 40-plus year ministries. And these are great people. And this is a reminder to all of us to pray, to take time and just to seek God's blessing on these great people, many of them raising their children. I marked a couple of quotes here. William Carey said, "I will venture to go, but remember that you must hold the ropes." He meant financially and in prayer. Carey said, I'll go over to India, Burma, and I will spend my life there, but I need you to send money, and I need you to pray that God would provide and give us the strength. And then William Booth, he's the founder of the Salvation Army. William Booth wrote this: "Not called, did you say? Not heard the call, I think you should say. Put your ear down to the Bible and hear him bid you go and pull sinners out of the fire of sin. Put your ear down to the burdened, agonizing heart of humanity and listen to its pitiful wail for help. Go stand by the gates of hell and hear the damned entreat you to go to their Father's house and bid their brothers and sisters and servants and masters not to come there. Then look Christ in the face, whose mercy you have professed to obey, and tell him whether you will join heart and soul and body and circumstances in the march to publish his mercy to the world." And that was William Booth, who lived his life seeking to get the gospel out to the world. Amazing thing. This work of missions, it is the work of Christ. God sent his son to a foreign land, to a dirty, corrupt, vile land that ended up killing his son. And he did that so they could get saved. That's what missions is all about. Missions is giving ourselves, giving of our money, our time, to pray for these great people. And I promise you, they get burdened, they get weary. We get weary in our country, and look how spoiled we are. We're wearied because the line to the In-N-Out burger place is too long. We're not hurting, folks. We're blessed. These dear missionaries are fighting against the spiritual wickedness that we can't even imagine. And then there's their marriage and their health and their children and their physical world, car breakdowns and you name it. And they've got burdens like you and I do. They're not supernatural. They're just sinners. And I should someday take the camera in there, and I've got a wall where I pray. I don't pray on the wall, but I pray in the little cubby hole, kind of a closet back behind my office. and missionary cards on the wall. And once you're up there, I leave people up there. But on the wall, there are several who've come home because of serious health problems. Some the spouse came home because of death. I mentioned Larry Owens, good friend of mine, down in Argentina, and he buried his wife about 2 years ago. Another good friend of mine I went to school with, Arthur Harris, who's in the Caicos Islands in the Caribbean, and his dear wife died of cancer. And he came home and did a lot of medical treatments trying to save her, and she died. Stayed here just a little while, and he just went back to the islands and ended up getting remarried there in the Caribbean. And these people's world, just like yours and mine, they have burdens like we do. They have sickness, they have death like we do, but they're doing it in the front lines while they carry the spiritual load. I want you to look with me at Luke 16. Just a quick story. In Luke 16:19, there was a certain rich man which was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared sumptuously every day. This guy had it all. He was the rich American, and not an American, obviously, but it's a parable. And there was, well, he didn't say it's a parable. It happened. There was a rich man. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which laid at his gate full of sores. And at verse 22, it came to pass that the beggar died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. And the rich man also died and was buried, and in hell lifted up his eyes, being in torments. So we've got this beggar who died. He didn't go to heaven. If you picture the earth, he didn't go to heaven because the atonement hadn't been made yet, but he went to a place called paradise. Jesus said to the thief on the cross, "Today thou shalt be with me in paradise." Not the grave, because Jesus was in the grave of Joseph of Arimathea. That old thief was probably thrown in a debtor's field or pauper's field or whatever. And so it was their soul went to this place called paradise. And then in Ephesians 4, it says that in that he ascended, what is it? But that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth and led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. And so prior to the cross, people that had put their faith in the Lord, those people were in this place called paradise, a two-part place. One is hell and one is paradise. Paradise is empty today because when Jesus left the cross, he said, "I got the blood, paid everybody's way, let's all get to heaven where we belong." But the other side in hell, they're still there in that compartmentalized hell until in Revelation 21 that death and hell are cast eternally into a lake of fire. And so the rich man could see Lazarus. And Lazarus was there with Abraham, all these great Old Testament saints there in this place of comfort and rest. And here's this man tormented by the flame. And I want you to notice the missionary cry. And he said in verse 27, "I pray thee, therefore, Father, that thou wouldst send him," that's Lazarus, "to my father's house, for I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come to this place of torment." And Abraham said, "They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them." And there's a lot of lessons in there. Abraham said, they've got the Bible, let them believe it. And he said, no, he said, if someone would raise from the dead, they'd believe it. Of course, someone was going to raise from the dead. And Abraham said, no, if they're not going to believe the Bible, they're not going to believe though somebody come back from the dead. And but the little phrase in there in verse 27 and 28 is what I want you to think about as we consider these 110 missionaries we support. And as you consider your financial support, your prayers for these people, and you're going. Brother Dave Matuzak, I don't know how old he is. He's a couple of years older than me, and I'm 64 this summer. But Dave has traveled with me around the country quite a bit, around the world quite a bit, and he's preached and taught and gone soul winning and given the gospel out. He's been preaching, I guess, since he was in his late 20s. But many people in our church have been to the mission field with us. And I want you to just think with me for a minute, this as we end Missions Month, kind of stretching it out a little bit with Johnny Esposito and Benjamin George. But this man in hell said, I have 5 brethren in my Father's house. Would you send somebody to tell them how to get saved so they won't come to this place of torment? You know, there's a place of torment, and a terrible place, a horrible place, where the Bible describes hell as a place where their worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched. Um, how could we even begin to describe how horrible it is? Things that the Bible says in different places about hell. It's a place of falling. It's a place of darkness. It's a place of being alone. It's a place of being tormented. It's a place of flame. It's a horrible, tragic place. It's a place apart from God. Some crazy modernistic preachers say, well, hell is just a place, certainly not a place with real fire. It's just a place where you're absent from God. No, Jesus said there's fire. Paul the Apostle said there's fire. It's a place of fire. And there's real fire. And people would say, well, I can't even imagine God letting people go to a place of fire. Well, I can't imagine God letting his son be stripped naked, beaten to nearly to death, whipped with a cat of nine tails, hung up, beaten, his face beaten by cruel soldiers, made fun of publicly, mocked and ridiculed, hung on a cross to hang bloodied and bruised. And Isaiah 53 says his visage, his appearance was so marred, he didn't even appear as a man. And I don't believe God would do that to his own son who'd never done anything wrong, but he did. He did. And it's hard for us to imagine the justice of God and the holiness of God, but a God who said, this is what I think of sin. Look at my son. Look at the stripes. Look at the shredded skin. Look at the beaten face. Look at the beard plucked out. Look at the crown of thorns. Look at the nail-pierced hands and feet. That's what I think of sin. And if you don't think God would punish a sinner, you're not paying attention. And so, but the cry from hell, every single person in hell, I guarantee you, is wishing you and I would go to that world and tell them about Christ. Every person in hell from the Middle East is wishing that you and I would go tell their loved ones in Baghdad, in Iraq, in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, in Israel. They're wishing we would go tell their loved ones about a place called heaven and about forgiveness. And there may be risk, but you know what? That person in hell realizes you're going to heaven and I'm going to heaven, and that person in hell says, well, you're going to be in heaven forever, so what if you suffer for a few years that my loved ones would get to go to heaven and not go to hell? The people in hell, they'd be happy to go get out of hell and suffer any earthly suffering in order to get people saved and go to heaven. Anything at all, they'd be willing to give it up. And of course, you know, anybody in heaven, think about this. It's not this story, but the Apostle Paul was caught up to heaven and saw things that he couldn't tell people about. And he came and became the most passionate soul winner and preacher. He didn't care. Throw rocks at me, throw me in jail. Doesn't matter. You know why he was so passionate about preaching the gospel? He'd seen heaven. You think anybody in heaven, seeing the glories of heaven, if they come back, don't you think that they would be passionately telling others how to get to heaven? And so I want to encourage you as we think about the call. And I think that's what that says in Spanish down there, but I know it's what it says in English. And the passage there in Hebrews 16:9, come over to Macedonia and help us. And in Hebrews, I'm reading without my glasses. That's Hikos. That's the book of Acts. I was going to say that's not Hebrews. That's the book of Acts 16. Come over to Macedonia and help us. They call it the Macedonian call. Paul the Apostle in a dream saw these people saying, come to Macedonia and help us. Now, could I encourage you? We have these, I've got one right here in front of me. I'll cover up the name on it, but we've got these pledge cards. And it's a missionary, it's a faith promise giving commitment. And we're asking everybody to fill out a pledge card. What will you give on a weekly basis or monthly basis, or maybe you can just give once a year. You know you're going to have whatever opportunity, but what will you give for missions? And financially, what will you do? And last year, every week, I gave the same amount to missions, and this week, I raised it just a little bit. I want to give a little bit more every week to missions, and you give however God would lead you to give. But could I encourage you, get a pledge card, and we'll hand them out in church for another week or two, but get a pledge card and fill it out and turn it in. Now, why a pledge card? Because it's you making a commitment. It's you saying, I will do this. And it helps us because we skim through the cards. Usually Brother Valdez does it. And we kind of look at it to see how we're doing on commitments from this year to last year and how much we can do for our missionaries. And Money is the big limitation. Now we need spiritual power. We need prayer, that God would protect people, that God would provide for people, that God would, just things like our missionary that was just here, Brother Schoof, Greg Schoof, and he just moved from Rwanda to, and I'm blanking on the country right now, but I've got his prayer card right here somewhere. But he just made that move, that transition, and to Uganda, and he's trying to decide where to locate his house. They're renting a home right now, but for a more permanent, and where to locate their radio station and where to locate the church. And they've got several men that they've trained already from their time in Rwanda, and they're going to help them start churches. And just wisdom, where to go, what to do, what's the right circle, and pray that God would bless his work and bless these people. So take time to pray for our missionaries. That's why we've got pictures of them. And you might see, they've got no children. I've got friends in Poland, Dave and Jolie Sock. We've supported them for many years. They don't have any children. But we've got other friends, Joe Wynn and Kella, and they've got their 3 or 4 little ones. And just this morning I was praying for Brother Fisher up in Alaska, church planting, and I was looking at the picture. I remember thinking, I think he's got one more baby now than he had in that picture. And pray for these couples, young couples raising their kids, for old people like us who are down the road. G and Heidi Chang, who are in Southeast Asia, working with the Hmong people. And Brother Chang is Hmong, and so he speaks the language, and so he already knew it. So he went over there to work across different countries, and just wonderful people serving God. Take this book, take time to pray. Take a couple missionaries a day and pray, and then get a pledge card. And if you're not getting out much, you can send a text, call the office, send a note in, and but allow us to join together to make some pledges. If you've never given regularly to missions, why don't you just this year, 2021, just say, this year I'm going to give X dollars a week, or X every other week, whatever it is. You're going to give to foreign missions, and not just foreign missions. Our mission is also help start churches locally in America. And so I just hope you'll keep the cause of world missions fresh in your heart. This weekend you'll get to meet Benjamin George, 3rd generation missionary. Next week you'll get to hear from Johnny Esposito, 1st generation. He and Joe did not grow up in church, and Johnny was in the Army, and he's a tough guy and strong, and he's a man's man, and now serving God. And his kids are all grown. They're grandpa and grandma. And what great people we get to support in prayer and in finance. Hope you have a great weekend. Let's pray for Saturday soul winning, our Bible clubs this weekend. Pray for a great Sunday. We've had people saved and baptized Sunday morning and Sunday night the last couple of weeks. January is a great month. Bills paid, people saved and baptized. Would you pray for a great February? But just this Sunday, if this is the last Sunday we have before the trumpet, let's pray for God to richly bless the work of the gospel here in Wildomar and across our country. Boy, our country needs prayer. And so let's be people of prayer. God bless you. Have a great weekend.